So let's talk about panning and zooming, and hopefully this will really help you with your final project. What I want you to do is think of this long strip here as like an entire scene. You could think of the numbers as buildings. So this is a building on a street, this is another building on the same street, and the different colors around it represent the landscaping around the building. And so if we look at what we're going to be going for, keep that in mind. And pretend you're the cameraman that is trying to pan this city street. And then you want to zoom in and you want to zoom out occasionally. So the way to think about this in the software is this is your view through your camera. It's your stage in reality, but if you want it to look like items are being presented to the viewer where the cameraman is panning to the right, we have to move the world to the left. So that's the way I like to think about it, is this is my camera and I just have to keep the camera still. And if I want the world that's in front of the camera to look like it's moving to the left, or in other words, I want to look like I'm panning the world to the left, then I have to move the contents of the world to the right. If I want the world to get closer to me, so I'm zooming in on an item, my camera again stays still, I have to move the world closer, which in animation terms means doing a scale up. So let's start by giving the illusion that the camera person is panning across this entire cityscape from building number 1 through building number 7. So first thing we need to do is get in here and fill the stage with this. So we could start with our symbol, click on the corner, use the shift tool, scale down, do a lot of playing around till we get it the right size, or we could do a combination of that, or just simply go right to properties and say, okay, how tall is our stage? And we remember that was 533, so let's give us a little cushion and let's put 535 with this lock, and that should be just the right size. So we're going to start out with the very left edge of the cityscape, and then we're going to give the illusion that we're panning to the right. Go over about 3 seconds. Do our F6. So we have to move our city to the left. Put in our classic tween. Command return just to see what that looks like, and it does indeed look like we are panning. Now what if we wanted to zoom out of building 7 over the next second, let's say. So let's go over here, we'll do our F6, and hopefully you see what the problem is here. If I make this smaller to make it look like we're zooming out, the issue is we now see a whole bunch of kind of nothingness behind it, which wouldn't look very realistic. So if you want to ever zoom out that far on a scene, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to build your scene so that it contains more stuff. So in other words, what comes after building 7? You'd have to have that. So maybe building number 8, or maybe there's a park here. But also, what's under building 7? Is there a street here, cars parked down here? Are we at the sky and the sun? So the reason that I don't jump in and show you the camera in the program right away is I think you have to get the big picture that your stage is one size and you have to figure out in advance how much of any scene that you have you're going to show us. In other words, what's the maximum you're going to be zoomed out? That's how big you have to go. Zooming in, not a problem, because you can always zoom way in. Let's do that. Over the next second and a half, let's say that we want to go from zoomed way out to zooming way in on building number 4. And I might have to command minus a few times to really back up. I can also use my properties panel to just put in a much bigger number for the size of this symbol. And let's click here, shift click, right click, and put in our classic tween. So now after our pan, we have a zoom out that's not overly realistic if that were a building, and then an incredible zoom in. Say over the next second, we want to go back to our initial starting point of having us focused in on building number 1. We could manually do that, or we could take the easy way and just simply click, option click and drag, and that brings us back. So that would be, if you were a camera person, you'd be holding the camera, zooming to the left and pulling back on your zoom so that you're zooming out on at the same time. I'm going to show you an interesting technique for zooming. This student work right here starts out with a red screen. Only to zoom out and reveal that that red was the butterfly's eye. Sorry, I meant caterpillar's eye. Then later on in the animation, we get really close here, yellow, then close up of red again. We get the reveal that that was the butterfly. So not only is there something very interesting about that presentation because you had no idea what you were looking at, for example, at the very beginning when you were zoomed all the way in on red, but also, if you think about this, it saved the student a ton of work. Can you imagine the difference if the student was zoomed out the whole time on the cocoon and we had to watch the transformation, or he had to animate the transformation of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly? A lot more work. So I'm not suggesting that you always look for the easy way out as an animator, but if the easy way is the better way, well, another example would be, let's say you're animating something like the Incredible Hulk, where you have a skinny man turning into a giant beast. If you were to animate that straight on, could be very interesting, right? We get to see this guy's shirt rip and his skin go from a pale color to green and his muscles start to develop, but a lot of work. What if you wanted that same experience for the audience, but a lot less work for yourself? What could you do? Turn the camera, pan to a wall, for example, where there's a shadow of the man turning into the Hulk, and then all you have to do is animate a shadow. So you're just dealing with shapes rather than the skin color and the shirt ripping and all that different stuff. Okay, let me clean a few things up here. I'm going to zoom into my stage a little bit more. I'm going to rename this just BG for background. It changed because when I imported the Illustrator document, it renamed the layer on me. Let's add a person in here so that we can experiment with panning when there's also a moving object involved in the scene. So we'll go to the frame right after, put in our F7. We'll go back out to that Illustrator document that we had, and we're going to copy the little figure and bring that figure in. If you would like to, of course, you can make something a little more sophisticated than my little figure here, but this is certainly good enough to get the idea across. So again, we're going to do an edit copy, and then in animate a edit paste. We'll get those options, and we just want the middle two. So I'll scale this down a little bit, and then we will go ahead, turn it into a symbol, and we'll make it an animated symbol so it looks like it's rocking back and forth a little bit to help give the illusion of it running. Very hard to see against the stage color. So why don't I just go ahead and extend out my background a little bit and extend person out a little bit. And by the way, if I haven't talked about this yet, this right here is a broken tween. And that's because there was a tween all the way out to here. In other words, it thought that the next thing we were going to do was going to be a tween. And it's saying you have to have a keyframe to a keyframe for a tween. Thus, you just broke your tween. For now, I'll just right click and remove it. All right, so we'll F8, give it a name. Again, it's going to be a graphic symbol that we're working with. We're going to go into the library, into that graphic symbol. And here it's going to be super hard to see because of that background. So what we can do is just temporarily change our background color. If I change the background to gray, I'm going to go up to View, Rulers, drag out a guide just to kind of give me a base. And I want to start out the position rocked all the way back like this. And then what I want is something about here where he goes forward and then a little bit later where he goes back, so it looks like he's rocking around. Now, what we would do is do our F6 a couple times, position those, and put in our classic tween. See if you can anticipate what problem would occur if we just do it like I just said. And here's a hint. Keep in mind, we're inside of the symbol. So we took that little person from Illustrator, brought that little person into Animate, turned it into a symbol, but here inside the symbols, if we click on this, what is it? It's a drawing object. And that's how things usually come in from Illustrator, as a drawing object. But it's not a symbol inside the symbol. So if in fact, let me just do it so you can see, and then I'll back up. So don't follow me down this rabbit hole, but I'll F6. F6, put in the classic tween, and if we look in the library, well, we get this warning, but if I click OK and then we look in the library, you can see we ended up with this extra stuff. So I'm going to Command Z all the way back to where I just had the single frame. Going to delete these mistakes from my library, and now I'm going to say, as weird as this seems inside of my symbol, I have to make this symbol again. So I could call it person in symbol, maybe, just to help me remember why I did that. And then now I will do my F6 and my F6. And I'd want this to look kind of quirky, so I'll make him go forward a little on the slow side, and then he'll go back on the fast side, and then so all I have to do is go into the middle and make him go forward. I could put in easing in here, but it's already so quirky that doesn't matter. So now we'll put in our classic tween, and that's how our little person's going to rock around in there. Get back to my main timeline. And then next video, we'll get this little person interacting with our background.